Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Thank you for joining us. Attorney General William Barr says he thinks the FBI spied on President Trump's 2016 campaign. The remark came during a Senate hearing today on unrelated matters. But much like yesterday, he was peppered with questions about the special counsel's report, which will be released with redactions next week. Here's the exchange with Senator Jeanne Shaheen, who asked him about his plans to review the conduct of the FBI in this probe.
I am going to be reviewing both the genesis and the conduct of intelligence activities directed at the Trump campaign during 2016. I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It's a big deal. I'm not talking about the FBI necessarily, but intelligence agencies more broadly.
So you're not suggesting, though, that spying occurred?
I don't, I guess you could, I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
Those remarks appeared to echo President Trump's criticism of the probe. Here is the president this morning calling the investigation into him and his campaign an act of treason.
It was an illegal investigation. It was started illegally. Everything about it was crooked. Every single thing about it. There were dirty cops. These were bad people. You look at McCabe and Comey, and you look at Lisa and Peter Strzok. These were bad people. And this was an attempted coup. This was an attempted takedown of a president. This was an illegal witch hunt, and everybody knew it, and they knew it too, and they got caught. And what they did was treason.
So let's bring in now CBS News Washington correspondent Paula Reed at the White House. CBS News Chief Congressional Correspondent Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill. Julia Manchester is a reporter for The Hill. She's with us from D.C. And here on set is CBSN legal contributor and former Assistant U.S. Attorney from the Eastern District of New York, Keir Dougal. Thanks so much to all of you for being with us. Paula, I'd like to start with you. What exactly is Barr reviewing about the investigation? Does he believe there was misconduct?
Well, Tanya, that was quite a disclosure from the nation's top law enforcement official to suggest that there may have been spying on the Trump campaign. Now, later, he walked that back. He said, look, I didn't mean to imply that any improper surveillance occurred, but it's something I'm looking into. Now, I have confirmed in speaking with officials that Barr has assembled a team to look into the origins of the Russia investigation and determine whether or not there was a valid reason to launch that investigation. Tanya, within the Justice Department, there is a concern that it may be too easy to open counterintelligence investigations. One example officials point to is the fact that former Attorney General Jeff Sessions was the target of a counterintelligence investigation while he was Attorney General, after he failed to disclose his contacts with the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak. But what's so interesting here is what he said pretty much echoed what the president had said a short time earlier. And there will be people who will ask whether or not here the recently nominated and confirmed Attorney General is doing the president's bidding at the expense of the rank and file law enforcement. But Barr defended his actions. He said, look, I believe it's my duty to make sure that the civil liberties of all Americans, presidential candidates or not, are protected.
Now, Keir, I want to turn to you because you did draw a difference between allegations of spying and concerns with the FISA process. Explain that to us. Is this just a matter of semantics?
Well, it may be, but it shouldn't be. I mean, this is the Attorney General of the United States who is the premier law enforcement officer, and careful prosecutors don't speak in a way that creates semantic ambiguities like this. So I think everybody would agree that improper surveillance should never occur. And there are multiple safeguards in the Justice Department investigatory process in connection with the courts to prevent improper surveillance or spying like this. To get for instance, to listen in on a phone call, there is a very detailed review process that goes all the way to Washington, and then there's an application to a judge that requires demonstration of evidence of probable cause, and that evidence is submitted under oath. So there's an independent, arbiter of the facts, a judge who is a neutral, who has to make a decision about whether or not the predication, the evidence to go forward with the surveillance actually exists.
So did that seem out of character to you to hear the Attorney General sort of admit that he thought there might have been spying going on?
The language is very, very concerning. The language that law enforcement uses is the words like monitoring, surveillance, and investigating. Spying is it's a loaded term, and it's one that he clarified at the end of his testimony. For those of us who were listening to the entire thing, you hear that he clarified what he meant by that. But it does, as Paula said, it has the effect. When the leader of the law enforcement agency of the United States of America suggests that there was spying that occurred.
Everybody's ears are perking up.
Everybody's ears are perking up,
Yeah.
and it undermines the hard work of tens of thousands of law enforcement agents that seek to find evidence without fear or favor.
All right, so Nancy, what position are Democrats taking in light of these suggestions that the origins of this investigation may have been questionable?
You know, I think here is exactly right that the Attorney General left a lot of confusion in his wake here on Capitol Hill. And you have to wonder whether that was intentional, because at the start of the hearing, and you played the clip, he said that he does believe that spying took place. But at the end of the hearing, as Keir just pointed out, he said, and I'm quoting, "I'm not saying that improper surveillance occurred. I'm concerned about it and looking into it." So he certainly left the impression that something untoward had taken place, but at the same time was saying he didn't necessarily have any evidence of something untoward taking place. And for the nation's top law enforcement officer to basically come to Capitol Hill and leave that impression is very unusual, to say the least. And it did start ringing alarm bells here on Capitol Hill. You had a couple of top Democratic lawmakers, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee in particular, Jerry Nadler, saying this runs completely counter to what the Department of Justice has told us in the past, and we want clarification immediately. There are certainly Democrats who are going to argue that the Attorney General is doing the president's bidding here and kind of muddying the waters, discrediting this investigation, because, as the president has been saying from day one, he believes, the Attorney General doesn't necessarily believe that, but the president certainly believes that all of this has been a witch hunt.
That's it. For a careful attorney, it was an amazing either slip up or, as you said, potentially intentional obfuscation there. All right, so Barr was also asked about the issue of obstruction, which Mueller did not give a definitive position on, and here's that exchange.
Did he express any expectation or interest in leaving the obstruction decision to Congress?
Not that he didn't say that to me, no.
So he said the obstruction decision should be up to you?
He didn't say that either. But that's generally how the Department of Justice works.
So, Julia, Barr also said he spoke to Mueller about this and that Mueller's reasoning on obstruction will be detailed in the report. But will that be enough for lawmakers, or is seeking Mueller's testimony inevitable here?
Be enough for lawmakers at this point, Tanya. You know, you've seen that Democrats have really drilled into this issue of obstruction because it's really the thing they're hanging on to at this point to save face. You know, for the past 2 years, they've kind of run with this narrative that there could have been very likely collusion or coordination and conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russian election meddling. But then this report kind of disproved that. However, we've seen Democrats continuously kind of focus on this question of obstruction because, you know, it's their only way to really save face in terms of this at this point. So I could definitely see House Democrats essentially getting Mueller, or subpoenaing Mueller, or trying to get Mueller to testify before the hearing to get more information on that.
All right, so Nancy, will Congress be getting a different redacted version of the Mueller report than the public, and have the calls for a subpoena to get the full report quieted down?
They have not. What Barr said in this hearing was that while he has no intention of handing over the full unredacted report to Congress, when he does issue the report publicly with the redactions in it, if lawmakers on the relevant committees, and the chairs in particular, have specific questions about redactions, if there's something that they need to know about, they can come to him and he will work with them to try to get them that information. This is his way of saying to Congress, look, I'm not trying to hide anything from you. I am not redacting this material for political purposes. In fact, if you want to know it, I'll help you out. But Democrats are arguing that that's not good enough, that they're not going to know what they want to know if it's blacked out, and that they are conducting investigations. As Julia mentioned, lots of ongoing obstruction of justice and other investigations, abuse of power, and they need to have that information. So they are sticking with their threat as of now that they are going to issue a subpoena and try to take DOJ to court if they don't get a full unredacted version of the Mueller report.
Right. All right. Okay. Barr, of course, was asked about redactions that he might make to protect the privacy of third parties. Here's that exchange.
Does that mean that you will redact information to protect the reputational interests of the president?
No. I'm talking about people in private life.
Okay.
Not public office holders.
So here, just to back up there, he's talking about the fact that if a private person who is not accused of a crime in the end is mentioned in the report, he will try to protect that person's privacy, but he doesn't extend that courtesy to the president because the president is a public figure. But that also doesn't mean that he won't protect the president in other ways. Correct, Keir?
Correct, and that goes exactly to the point that Nancy was just making about the Democrats' concern about they don't know what they don't know. And so you read between the lines of what the testimony is. So a lot of testimony today and yesterday about the public report. I think inevitably are going to be a separate set of disclosures to Congress. And Rule 6e has a specific provision that allows, in cases of counterintelligence information, that allows that information to be shared with the appropriate federal law enforcement officer. Certainly, the intelligence component on the Hill would fall into that category. Obviously, those folks, they have the required security clearances. So, I'm sure there will be a back and forth after the public report is disclosed. I think maybe Mr. Barr is hoping that there'll be enough there that it'll calm things down. But I think the folks on the Hill are going to demand, and they have. There's a path under the law. There's a path that would allow Mr. Barr to reveal virtually all of the information in a closed session to the intelligence components on the Hill.
Well, he did say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there are 4 types of information that would be protected. Grand jury material, classified information, material tied to ongoing investigations, and again, the information that could harm peripheral third parties. So it's possible that he could use one of those categories to hide information about the president, correct?
He could try, but as I've said, under the grand jury rules, there is a provision that allows for, remember, Mueller's investigation was a counterintelligence investigation. The bulk of it, the crimes were sort of secondary to it. And so the grand jury rules permit the disclosure to appropriate officials of counterintelligence information. And obviously, all those folks, the Gang of 8, they've got appropriate security clearances.
Right. So technically, nothing needs to be hidden from them.
Well, yeah, maybe the law enforcement part, the open investigations, maybe they don't need to know about that. Maybe the peripheral third-party privacy stuff you can set aside.
All right, Keir, thanks so much. I want to switch gears now to immigration. The president this morning criticized the asylum laws as too lax. Here's what he said.
I think that the whole asylum rules, laws, and regulations have been taken advantage of by people that are very bad people in many cases. These are the people running the cartels. They're gaming the system. They have been for years. The only difference is our economy is now so strong that more people come up. We have done a great job at the border with bad laws. It's very important that the Democrats in Congress change these loopholes.
So, Paula, we know the president wants a tougher approach to immigration, but he did claim yesterday that he doesn't want to restart the family separation. So what exactly are the changes he's looking to make?
Well, Tanya, I spoke with a senior White House official yesterday, and clearly one of the first changes he is making is the leadership of the Department of Homeland Security. This official said the president is frustrated by the department's inability to implement Trump policies. Of course, the Department of Homeland Security is a sprawling bureaucracy that is sort of notorious for being slow-moving and, well, bureaucratic. So any failure to push through policies, well, that's partly the fault of this White House's inability to navigate that bureaucracy. But they believe now, with this new acting director who they've put in charge of the agency, they may have some success implementing 3 specific policy changes. The first one is they want to be able to detain migrant children for longer than the current 20-day limit, because that forces them to not be able to detain family units that cross the border for an extended period of time. They also want to make it harder for people to come here seeking asylum. They say right now 90% of the people who come across the border and say they have a credible fear of returning to their home country, that they are given a sort of pass, a green light to go to the next stage and allowed to stay here. They want these claims more thoroughly vetted. They want these claims to be checked against State Department records, records that have to do with that home country or that home city. And also they want to make it harder for recent asylum seekers to receive work permits. The administration believes that is a draw for people to come here to the U.S. But again, all of these changes would likely be challenged in the courts. And so far, the administration has had trouble getting any of its immigration policies through the courts. But it appears that this particular initiative, Tanya, I think it's more about the court of public opinion and galvanizing the president's hardline immigration supporters ahead of 2020.
But Nancy, what are you hearing from Republicans on the Hill? Are they united behind the president's purging and his push to, quote, be tougher at the border? What are they saying about all of this?
Well, they're always going to be supportive of more border security, but they are a little bit concerned, first of all, about this purge, about what it means for the stability of the Department of Homeland Security and what it says about the president's outlook on immigration going forward. And they're also a little troubled by the sort of willy-nilly aspect of some of the president's comments about immigration over the past week or so, talking about the fact that he's going to close the border and then saying he's not going to close the border and then saying, well, unless X and Y happens, then I'll close the border. I mean, that's the sort of talk that makes them nervous, because they believe that not only does it send mixed messages to the U.S. population, but also to foreign governments, most importantly, one of our largest trading partners, Mexico. So with everything that the president has been saying this week and last week about immigration, they're sort of taking a very cautious approach to wait and see, is it still going to stick after 24 to 48 hours.
And are any of them grumbling about the close relationship between Stephen Miller and the president? Are they saying that, hey, maybe he's the one pulling all the strings behind the curtain?
Absolutely. I mean, Stephen Miller is someone who many of them knew because he was an aide to Jeff Sessions when Sessions was a senator here on Capitol Hill, and he was someone whose views on immigration were viewed as extremely right-wing, and this is in a party that itself has moved to the right on immigration over the past decade or so. So he was something of an outlier, and it is a cause for concern, certainly among Democrats, but even among some Republicans, that Miller appears now to be calling so many of the shots on this issue.
And Julia, quickly, how much of this push on immigration is geared simply toward the president's re-election strategy, thinking that this will galvanize his base?
You know, I think quite a bit of it actually is, if we look back just to the 2018 midterm elections, we saw there was a huge push on the issue of immigration. And I think going into 2020, the president and his campaign team realized that the issue of health care, which Trump tried to kind of bring back into the fold a few weeks back, isn't going to necessarily work because it's so, Obamacare is so popular across the country. So I think the president is really trying to galvanize his own political base. Let's not forget that when he launched his campaign way back in 2015, he launched it on building the wall and, stricter immigration laws. So I think that's something that the president is really banking on in order to get his base out to the polls.
And Julia Manchester, Nancy Cordes, Paula Reed, Keir Dougal, thanks to all of you for being with us. Great panel.
You're welcome.